Video, I want to talk about how to design or organize a daily schedule or daily planner to help put your life in order in a way that corresponds with your values. So we're all familiar with the strategy of making a list, and really this is just for the highly organized people, making a list of the things that you have to do and then checking those things off as the day goes on. And a day is good when you can check everything off your list, and a day is bad if there are things left unchecked. And so if a student has an essay to write or a test to study for, maybe like a big test like the TEAS test or the GRE that they haven't studied for, they might feel terrible about it. They feel guilty. And so the traditional style of organization is making a list, then checking things off, and then feeling awful if you don't get to everything on your list. Now, the new way that I want to describe comes from organizational psychologist Stephen Covey in his book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And it's a values-centered daily planner. And to show you how to do this, and I've got a worksheet associated with it that I'm going to show you in a second, but I'm going to take you through a couple of activities, and the very first one is to make a list of everything in your life right now that you have to do. If you have a big long list like I do of just one day, the tasks, you can stick with the one day. If you have only a couple of things that you need to focus on today, then you might pick the next 5 days or the next week, and so there's a much longer list of activities that you have to do. So here is the worksheet, which is linked. The very first step is to make a list of all the things that you have to do over the next 24 hours, or again, the next 5 days, maybe the whole week. And then there will be an activity associated with that. But the first thing is just make your list. And so here is a list of things that I have to do that are on my to-do list just today. So I have to reformat figures for a book chapter. They were 100 DPI and need to be 300 DPI, and so that'll take me about 20 minutes. I need to prepare for classes tomorrow. I need to read a sample chapter by a colleague and give them advice, recommendations. I need to clean the floor of my house. I need to research a book that I'm working on. I need to respond to any emails that may have cropped up. I have a gen ed assessment to write. I need to make this video right here. I need to request medical files from my dentist for a new dentist, buy gifts from Target, and troubleshoot a classroom problem that's come up. So those are things that just came to me right now. I imagine that you'll have a similar list of things to do, but the very first step in working out a lifestyle planning or lifestyle organization is to have the list of things that you have to do. So these are the pressures that I have just coming into my office that are coming down on me, and I won't be able to focus on what's important to me or what I really value until I check all this stuff off, because there are consequences for each of them. Some of them are personal, some of them are occupational, some of them have to do with my relationships. And so make your list. If you already have, or if you don't have a list, pause it and take some time and reflect on what some of your tasks are to do today or over the next week. And then the next thing I want you to do is set your list aside. We're going to use it in a minute, but set your list aside. Now I want you to reflect on your values. Now, this is not an easy thing to do. Honestly, this would take you months of careful self-reflection, but there are some tricks we can use to clarify what our values are. And in order to do this, what we need to do is switch off our left brain. And so our left brain, over here, this is the side of our brain that works on high focus on like specific details, so like a narrowing of focus. It's what can generate lists, so we rely on our left brain when we come up with lists of things to do. We rely on our left brain when we use logic and rationale to solve problems. And so if there's a right way to do it and we know what that right way is, or we know how to find that right way, that's a left brain activity. A right brain activity is a more global perspective. It takes a step back. It looks at contexts. It looks at things like emotions and feelings and how our identity is supported by the choices that we make. So we're looking at broader, big picture stuff. And so when we make a list, we're using our left brain. So I want to help you turn that switch off of the left brain and turn the right brain switch on. And to do that, I'm going to invite you to do a thought experiment with me. And that thought experiment is going to force you into taking a big picture. And so that thought experiment is you going to a funeral. Let's say it's at a church. Everyone's dressed in black. There's somber music playing. There are a bunch of flowers, sad flowers, as the case may be. It's raining outside, right? People have their umbrellas. No one's really talking. They're talking, they're whispering. And you notice that you know everyone there in the church. And they're all organized around your family. And you see the picture on the mantle, and it's your picture. It's your funeral. Right, so just that right there, your mortality, thinking about the finitude of your existence, that's something that turns off your left brain and turns on your right brain. Because the left brain is focused on what should I be doing, but if you no longer exist, it's like that goes away, and now you're wondering, oh, wait a minute, there is a limit to what I can do and who I am, and what did I hope I have accomplished. And so in this thought experiment, I want you to think about your parents as they share something about you. They share a eulogy. Your closest friends stand up, have trouble kind of sharing what they want to share, but then they say something about you. And if you have children, they're grown up and they say something about you, and so on. People in your community, they talk about you. What is it that you hope they share about you? What do you hope people say about you, about your life, at your funeral when it's all over for you? Now, I don't intend for this to be morbid. What I'm trying to get at is what your values are when you scrape away all of the habitual activity in your life, all of the things that you do out of habit, all of the rote behaviors, all of the instinctual patterns, all of the things you do because you feel like you have to. Scrape all of that away. What do you want to shine above all of the rest? And if you can answer that question, and again, it would more realistically take you about 2 hours or 2 weeks or 2 months or 2 years to really clarify what those values are. But I want you to practice that, and if you want to set time aside, that would be even better. But maybe just that thought experiment right there, you can come up with 1 or 2 things. Now, as students in class shared some of those values, so here's a new list of personal values. Some students shared that they want to be remembered as fun. They want to be courageous. They want to be remembered as not having made significant mistakes. Living with no regrets. Being patient, that was one of my particular ones. Being a supportive friend. Being kind. And so on. So, again, these are personal values. Being fun, being courageous, someone who didn't make mistakes, or maybe they were mature, lived with no regrets, they were patient, they were supportive, they were kind. And the list was much longer that we generated in class. But these are some values that stood out beyond being a good student. Notice, no one said, I want to be remembered as a good student. So all of the things that you do for the sake of being a good student aren't really in support of your deepest values. My recommendation is going to be give them as little attention as possible so that you can focus your time and energy on supporting your values, on becoming the person that you want to become, or that you feel like you need to become, that is in your potential to become. So now you have 2 lists. One list is a list of things to do. The other list is the values that are most important to you. And maybe there will only be 1 or 2 values. That's fine. I have maybe 3 or 4. And a few of them I'm still not sure about. I'm trying to devote myself to them, dedicate myself to them, and I'm seeing if in my life there's the change that I'm hoping for. If not, then I'm going to cross it out and say that this isn't important enough for me to spend time doing. Once you've got those 2 lists, we can now get to the main part of the project or the activity, which is how to organize our schedule around our values. So what I'm sharing now is just a spreadsheet or a list of quadrants into which all of our daily activities will fall. And I have this worksheet linked. So the very first quadrant, or notice the first column here, these are activities that are urgent, that have to be done right away, or there will be a consequence. Someone will be upset, or you'll be upset. Maybe you'll get fired from a job, you'll get a bad grade on a test, and so on. This column are things that are not urgent. So it doesn't matter if you do them now or you do them later. Nothing's really going to change. They don't have to be done now. Maybe they have to be done later, or there'll be problems further on down the road, but they don't have to be done right now. So let's say you're driving down the road and you get a flat tire. That would be urgent. You have to fix it right now. But if you're driving down the road and you realize that one of your tires is low pressure, or you notice that your tires are starting to get bald, it's not urgent yet, but down the road you may have a problem. So it's not an urgent issue, but down the road it might become an urgent issue. Ignore it long enough, it will become urgent. And then these rows here, going this way horizontally, the first row is things that are important. So these are things that correspond to your values or are linked to things that are important to you. And then down here, these are things that are not important to you. And so something that's important to me might be exercising. I enjoy exercising. That's a quadrant 2 activity for me because I don't have to exercise. Nothing bad is going to happen if I don't. But down the road, maybe I'll have some cardiac issues or weight problems if I don't continue to exercise. Now, something that's not important to me is caring for our garden. That's not a huge issue for me. It's not important to me, but it's very important to my wife, and so sometimes she'll ask me to water something for her or move plants around, and so those are quadrant 3 activities. They're not important to me, but they're important to my wife, and they're urgent to her as well. And so those would go in quadrant 3. Now, if my values changed and I suddenly wanted to grow plants, then maybe that would move up to quadrant 1, or if I watered stuff before it needed watering, quadrant 2. And then quadrant 4, this is where we do things that are neither important nor urgent. So for me, this is playing video games, maybe looking at my phone, social media, checking my email when it doesn't really need to be checked, and so on. So those are the 4 quadrants. The next step that I want you to do is take the list of things to do and put them in their respective quadrants. Now, this might take a little bit of practice, and so what I want to do is look at the list that I made and put things in quadrants, and then hopefully you can do the same. So let's go back to that list that I created earlier. I want to change the layout like this. All right, so the first one, I want to reformat figures for a book chapter. This is important. So for Cambridge University Press, I already wrote the book chapter, so I did my part. This is some pedantic formatting thing that I don't really care about. So I'm going to put that one in quadrant 3. Preparing for my courses, that's important to me, and if I wait till the last second, I won't be ready. So this is a quadrant 2 activity. Reading a sample chapter by a friend of mine is a quadrant 3 activity. It's important to them, not so urgent to me. Sweep the house. That has to be done immediately because our dogs are shedding like crazy for some reason, even though it's freezing outside. Researching my new book. It's not urgent, but it's important. It's something that I'd like to do. That goes in quadrant 2. Responding to emails. I haven't looked at my email in 2 hours, so that's going to be a quadrant 1 activity. It's urgent and it's important. I have to write a gen ed assessment. It's not due right away, so that's a quadrant 2 activity. It's still important, but not urgent. Make this video. Oh, I got a request, so I'm making this video now rather than ignoring it. So it's important, and it seems urgent since the request came in. And it's important to me too, so it's not quadrant 3 for that reason. Request medical files. That's so that my new dentist knows what's going on inside my mouth. I'm going to say that's quadrant 2. It's not urgent yet. If I waited till next week, it would be. Buying gifts for friends, that's kind of in support of relationships. I'll say quadrant 2. Troubleshooting classroom problems. It's already become a problem, so that means it's urgent. Oops. So we'll put that in quadrant 1. Now, notice there aren't any items in quadrant 4, but when I get home, if I'm tired, I'm going to play video games. I don't put that on my list of things to do, but it's still often how I spend my time, and so that would be a quadrant 4 activity. What else do I do? I may walk my dogs. Again, this is how I spend my time, but it's not necessarily something I prioritize. I don't much care for it. My dogs do, and I want them to be healthy, so I'm going to say quadrant 2. It's not urgent that they be walked, but if they don't get any exercise, their health may falter. So I'm putting those things mostly into quadrants 1 and 2. And yeah, there are a couple in quadrant 3. So quadrants 1 and 2. Take a look at your list and try to filter them into the quadrants that they go in. And what you'll probably notice is that a lot of your items are in quadrant 1. It's like, oh, I've got to take a test. Oh, I've got to study for an exam. Oh, I've got to take a quiz. Oh, I've got to write a paper. Oh, I've got to prepare for a presentation. Oh, I've got to go to work. Oh, I've got to call my mom. Right? All of these things are pressure. They're tasks that are pressuring you to get done. The urgency is coming. And if you don't do it right away, then you're going to feel bad. You're going to feel guilty. You're worried that you're procrastinating all the time. So go ahead, go through that process, and put each task into the corresponding quadrant if you can. I'm hoping I gave you enough examples of what that might look like or what those tasks might be. Let me, just to clarify, let's look again at quadrant 3. I noticed some students had trouble with that. So quadrant 3 are really urgent things to somebody, but not you. And they seem really important to that person, but again, not you. So it's urgent. The urgency is coming from somewhere, usually someone else. You're being told that it's urgent, but it's not important to you. So I gave the example in class of you're walking around the mall. If you've ever been to a shopping mall nowadays, they're pretty much gone. But you're in a mall, and someone at a kiosk is like, hey, like, I got something to show you. It's really important. Come on, like, get over here. They're handing out flyers like, hey, do you have 1 minute to spare? And so you weren't thinking about this at all, but all of a sudden, like, you're going somewhere, you're doing something that's important to you, and someone, like, distracts you from it and says, hey, come give me some attention. And you can either be an asshole and say, like, no thanks, or just ignore them, or you can say, like, all right, fine, you can have a minute or two of my time, and give in to them. But when you do that, you're choosing to prioritize what's important to them. And so in that case, what you've done is selected a quadrant 3 activity. And it's really easy to fill your entire schedule up with quadrant 3 activities if you're not careful. So you've got quadrant 1 is urgent and important to you. Quadrant 3 is urgent and important to someone else. Quadrant 2 is not urgent, but it's important to you. So it's things that you prioritize. And then quadrant 4 isn't urgent and it's not important. So it's your time wasters. It's what you do just to kind of settle down, but it's mindless. You're not building towards anything. You're not doing anything for yourself. One of the students in class, Jakaya, shared that she likes to sweep and clean the house, and it relaxes her. It comforts her. It's something that she enjoys doing. Now, the house needs to be clean eventually, but unless it has to be done right the second, it's not urgent. But since she does it to support her own well-being and quality of life, it's still important. So it's a quadrant 2 activity through and through. And most planning and preparedness things and self-care activities fall into quadrant 2, provided they aren't urgent. So take a look at your list. Try to classify them into the quadrants that they belong to. And the final thing is to take a look at where those tasks fall. And what I'm going to guess is that for most of you, your daily activities and your things to do are going to fall in quadrant 1 as highly important, things that you have to do right now. And so you fill your schedule with quadrant 1 and sometimes quadrant 3 activities, things that are important to your friends or your family or your professors, your colleagues. And your entire day is spent right here. And you're so burned out at the end of the day that all you have time for is quadrant 4 activities. And so your day might look like this. You go to work, you work all day, you get home, you exercise, you go to practice if you're an athlete, you go to work if you have a job, you barely have time to eat and take a nap, and then it's 11 o'clock at night and you're exhausted and all you have energy for is looking at your phone and scrolling on the internet, or scrolling on social media. And then you go to sleep, you pass out, you go to sleep, and you wake up without getting enough sleep and you do it all again. And then that's your schedule, day after day. And there are some things that you never get around to and you feel awful about it. In that case, you'll have to take a lot of quadrant 1 activities and reframe them to become quadrant 2 activities. Because when you're focused only on the first column, quadrants 1 and 3, there isn't any time to link your activities with your values. So look at those values that come up. Being a courageous person, having no regrets, being patient, being a supportive friend, being kind. If all I'm doing in my life is like preparing for class, sweeping the house, researching a book, reformatting figures because some editor wants me to, playing video games and walking my dogs, then there isn't time for me to develop my personal goals, which might be becoming a more patient person, building a relationship with my wife, supporting my friends, being a supportive kind of person who is not selfish. And so when I'm playing video games, obviously I'm being selfish. When I'm shopping for a gift for a friend, that's less selfish, but maybe part of it, like I want to be known as a nice person, or a thoughtful, considerate person. So there might be some selfishness there as well. So let's take a look at this. The goal is having a lifestyle that supports my values, which would be a lot of quadrant 2 activities. These are things that are important, but they're not pressured on me right away. So I'm prioritizing them. If I can have a schedule filled with quadrant 2 activities, then I have mastered my schedule. If it's full of quadrant 1 and 2 activities, then I'm kind of stuck in a response pattern, waiting for things to announce themselves to me before I do them. So let's see here. I'm looking for quadrant 1 activities. Responding to emails. I probably log into my email like 30 times a day, which is excessive. In order for me to master that, I would have to give myself maybe 1 hour a day to respond to email. So I only check in at noon. And so this is what some people do. They only check their email or maybe twice for 20 minutes a time. So they'll check in at noon, they'll check in at 5, and they won't look at their email any other time. I check it like every hour, maybe twice an hour. I'm always waiting for someone to announce one of their urgent problems to me and for me to come running in and rescuing them. But I spend a lot of extra time doing this. So I probably spend 2 hours on email when I could just spend 40 minutes. So I would have to make a choice to plan only spending 40 minutes a day on email or 20 minutes a day on email. That way, I could free up some time to devote to how I can become a more patient person. I might have activities that I can devote or that are tailored towards practicing patience, maybe reflection activities, maybe journaling. But again, those activities would be not urgent, they would be important, and they would be in support of my values. What's another quadrant 1? Sweeping the house. If I prioritized sweeping the house, and keeping a clean house, then I might have a schedule where I do it once a week or twice a week. I have to do it about twice a week with our dogs. But I could do so in such a way that supports one of my goals, which might be not panicking, being more relaxed. So I could spend 5 minutes or 10 minutes twice a week, not just sweeping, but also like practicing relaxing, and so not trying to rush through it as quickly as possible. If it's a task to do, I just want it done, so I'm going to rush through it. But if I take my time on it, I'll appreciate it more. I'll enjoy the house that we have, that I have time to sweep, and so on. It can be a more self-sustaining, self-supporting activity. But again, I can't wait for it to become a problem, so I need to be proactive with that in order to avoid it becoming a quadrant 1 activity. Making this video Had I thought ahead with this activity, I would have already had the video. I would have practiced going over it. I would have had the resource for students in advance so maybe they could listen to this video before coming to class. I wasn't proactive, and so instead I waited for someone to say, hey, will you make a video about this, before I even thought about it. So, and then it became like this urgent thing that I have to do. I'm hungry right now. I would rather be eating, but I have this urgent task to do. Had I been more prepared and planned more adequately, had in the past I followed this methodology and organized my schedule according to my values, then I could have done this in support of my students and in support of becoming a better teacher, which are values of mine, rather than waiting for it to become a problem and then kind of rushing to fix it. I hope you get the idea. Those are just a couple of examples. The idea here in the schedule is not to make a list of quadrant 1 and quadrant 3 activities, but to organize your schedule in such a way that most of what you do is connected to quadrant 2 values. So it's essential that you make your list of values and then really think about how best to grow those values or to support those values in your life, and then making your schedule fit into it. Make your schedule obey your values and not the other way around. Living so that urgent tasks can be solved is not a satisfying life. But organizing your life around your values means that every day you're supporting the things that are most important to you. So hopefully you made that connection and you were able to understand those 4 quadrants and how your activity, your daily tasks fit into them, and maybe how those tasks can be reoriented. I'll have to say, I've been doing this for a while, and that's why there are so many quadrant 2 activities on my to-do list. I think about how to plan my day in terms of them. Even 2 years ago, my list was all, oh, what do I have to do? What do I have to do? What do I have to do? And I would be so stressed out. I still have a few of those, and so there's still room for improvement, but I've made a huge change in terms of the way I think about my to-do list. And I feel like I'm much happier because of it, because I know I'm spending time dedicated to my values or supporting my values, and therefore I'm growing in the direction that I hope to be growing.